Hello everyone, this will be my last teaching memo of the spring 2020 semester. I know you are all disappointed. Well, schools will not be opening this semester. I believe this is a good decision. People are starting to feel antsy, but getting back outside in groups is a very dangerous notion right now. We need to look at the data, not just when the curve is flat, but when it's back to normal. I hope you all got outside yesterday. It was 80 degrees here in Poughkeepsie. Unfortunately, I was busy grading select response tests while Dr. Laura and Sophie went up to Schenectady to visit Laura's mom. Laura's mom's birthday was on Saturday. We did have a nice dinner and cake to celebrate Laura's birthday. Our first dinner out on the deck. I'm including a picture of the birthday girl with her cake made by Sophie. And that's my grandson in the other picture whose birthday also was yesterday. So 2 birthdays in the Mawiney-Sagan family. Okay, enough of that stuff. The course ends on Monday, May 11th. That's a week from today. I'll be closing my grade book a week after that on May 18th. If you are planning to take an incomplete, you must have completed 66% of the requirements. That's changed due to the COVID-19 crisis. It used to be 75%. As I mentioned, I think I mentioned that in my assignment video, that's 17 courses out of the 26, 17 assignments out of the 26 that we have. Please contact me by email or phone or text if this is a course of action you are contemplating. It involves a contract which must be signed by you, and usually the duration of that contract is 4 weeks, so it's not an indefinite period of time. I've closed the last discussion board and thought there was some great discussion, very good discussion, about the differences between Mr. Jones and his student Marissa and Miss W and her student Emily. This formative assessment / grading discussion is a very crucial one to all current and prospective teachers. Remember that what Miss W did was a process. Formative assessment or assessment for learning is a process. I can't emphasize that enough. It's not a test. Formative assessment is not a test. Formative assessment tests are tools, so I like to call them formative assessment tools. So probing understanding and then modifying instruction or having students adjust their learning. So remember the mantra. The 7 characteristics of assessment for learning can be summed up in the mantra: where am I going, where am I now, and how can I close the gap? So that's a good little phrase to keep in your mind to help you remember what formative assessment is, and if what you're doing can answer those 3 questions for students. Again, you need to check your grades. Make sure all your assignments have handed in or they become a 50. For those who owe me a good deal of work, you will be hearing from me via email if you haven't heard from me already. Most of you have already heard from me already. Many of you will be completing the 3-part analytic summary. It was due yesterday, but that's okay. I don't deduct points for late work. As we all know, that's a grading practice that distorts achievement. Yes. For your final baseline survey, consider cutting and pasting from your initial post. I think I recommended that before. But limiting to 200 words or less. I don't want an 18-page discussion of those questions. For the most part, the questions in the baseline survey mirrored my learning targets for all the modules, and I've contemplated making that a final exam, but in a way it is, because it is 15% of your grade. So please be aware that there are still classmates submitting their tests on the revised select response test discussion board. Please go back there and take those tests. I can't ask you, I'm begging you. I know Cindy C in one section only has 2 people that took them. There may be another person that only has one. So please help those people out. I know many of you have taken many more than 5 tests, and I am grateful for that, and so are the people whose tests you're taking. Module 11, many of you mentioned Marissa, as I knew you would, because there are many like Mr. Jones in the teaching profession, even at Turo, I understand, as several of you have mentioned. It always amazes me that professors who are training teaching candidates do not model good assessment practice. They need to take Dr. Tom's course. I use this piece to activate your conversation about assessment for learning practices and have you go deeper than just comment on how bad Mr. Jones was and how you have had teachers or professors like him. Several of you mentioned knowing a teacher like Mr. Jones without mentioning what he could have done. And that's the important part. What could Mr. Jones have done? And the thing is, many of the things that Miss W did and was shared in the Emily video. So, or even compare what some of the things I did, like the process I did with a selective response test. That is an assessment for learning process. There were good comments about the practice of docking students for late work. Many gave the rationale that will encourage all students to be lazy and ignore deadlines. As most of you know by now, Dr. Tom strongly disagrees with this and advises everyone to create a culture of diversity in your classroom from the first day. All of you agree that we need to differentiate instruction, but you struggle with differentiating your grading practices to accommodate for those students who may be struggling or may be going through things at home or maybe just don't have good work habits. There are many ways to have consequences for cheating in late work without punishing with grades. That should not be one of them. The acceptance of late work, allowing students to do work over, was mentioned often. A few of you referred to Rick Wormelli's article and both his Wormelli and Reeves toxic grading practices, argued against averaging a student's various attempts and do-overs, comparing it to a long-distance runner who doesn't get credit for his best time because she has to average all the times of the previous attempts. This seems easy when put that way, but take heed. My students on the dangers of averaging. If you can wait, if you have electronic grade book, if that will allow you to weight your assignments, that to me is much different than just not averaging them. I believe it's difficult not to average when you're giving different types of assessments. Now, I've given written assessments, your initial posts. I've given in your final baseline survey, performance assessments with the selective response test, discussion boards, quizzes. So, in vocabulary in your own words. So those are all different kinds of assignments. So weighting those is much different than averaging them, and I think a much more viable practice. I didn't average all your attempts on the selective response test, and I think that's what Reeves and Wormelli are talking about. Those are the things you shouldn't be averaging, because as people get more feedback, their attempts get better. At least they should be. Often we don't see the power of allowing our students to do work over, but several of you mentioned you appreciated my practice of allowing do-overs. Just think how you feel when you know an assessment is not do or die, that if you miss something or make a mistake, you can go back and fix it, just like in a real job. There were those, however, who agreed with a teacher in the Merrill article about gaming the system, that if a student knows they will get another chance, they won't try as hard. To me, I think that's BS. I think everybody's going to try hard the first time so they don't have to go back during lunch or after school and do it again. I mean, that does not make sense to me. It's what I call ego-based grading. Yeah, if I let one do it, they'll all do it. And that's not true, and I think you know that's not true. We should not, I've mentioned this in some of my discussion board posts, is that we should not make our policies based on the kids who are going to game the system. Okay, we'll weed those people out and work with them individually, but don't force everybody to go by the rules because there's one kid or two kids that you don't trust. Anyway, throughout this course, I brought up Miss W's goal that everyone could get an A plus in this class, my class, which is my belief in all my courses. I mentioned in the discussion board that one semester, the lowest grade I gave was an A minus, and how I was chastised by my supervisor for what he considered grade inflation. This was about 7 or 8 years ago. Hasn't happened since. Whereas I thought I did an exceptional job of teaching that semester and designing my course, he looked at it in a very negative way. So it's an old fixed mindset when it comes to teaching and learning, is that not everybody can get an A plus. There is a bell curve, and that's old time thinking, which I don't think is accurate, and we shouldn't be functioning with that kind of belief system. Finally, if there's anything you need to take away from this course, it's the power of formative assessment. Fisher and Fry state that the days of making lesson plans for the year are over, and we need to vary teaching and time so learning stays constant. Oh, can you imagine? We need to use formative assessments to guide us, to reteach, regroup, allow students to adjust their learning as well. If you want to be a great or better teacher, learn how to use formative assessment. In Popham's chapter, he says, if this is such a powerful practice, why isn't everybody using it? And it's hard to teach old dogs new tricks. I shared 2 articles this week. One on using recess. It was from the Atlantic. Nixing recess, the silly, alarmingly popular way to punish kids. And another on should homework be graded. These 2 topics came up during the discussion, and I don't know if it came up in all 3 sections, but I know it came up in a couple of them. So those are good articles. You should download those and check it out, because there's positives and negatives to both. The last text I wanted to mention was the Moss and Brookhart article, which I had in auxiliary materials in Module 10. To me, this is one of the 7 characteristics of assessment for learning that Tripui and Stiggins mentioned as student self-assessment, and it's one that we don't give a lot of pay a lot of attention to. We don't give a lot of time to it. But this is a section of a pretty good book on formative assessment, and it's on student self-assessment. You should download this as well and check it out. Keep it and refer to it often. Lastly, I hope you take the words of Reeves, O'Connor, and Mormelli with you when it comes to grading practices until all schools move to mastery grading procedures, as one of you talked about in your initial post, how your school doesn't use grading and it's all mastery. Until that happens for all our schools, we must let our grades reflect an accurate picture of students' attainment. That's what parents think those grades mean. We must leave our ego out of the process. When I hear statements like they had plenty of time to complete their work, a 0 will affect their grade much more than a 50, allowing do-overs will demotivate the good kids. I know that this is the ego talking. It's like I feel better by doing this. This makes me feel good. And it may not be a conscious behavior, but it definitely is a subconscious one. One student even mentioned that having a teacher, this is not a current student, but one of my former students mentioned that having a teacher like Mr. Jones will teach students independent behavior. They have to go out and find out on their own. For example, seeking help from the teacher or another student. I disagree, and Eric Jensen, in his book Teaching with Poverty in Mind, stated, and I believe him, that if there's a behavior or a skill you want to see in your classroom, you better be teaching it. Don't just expect kids to know how to do an essay on comparative literature. You have to teach them how to do that. So I'll leave you with this expectation message that I hope you will all take with you. This is important. You can do it. I will not give up on you. Very, very powerful words. So go in peace, enjoy your summer, and continue to stay safe and learn and teach like a demon.